Well, thank you, Steve. I think we should take a break, or at least I think I should take a break because you have a presentation that you want to talk about
Right,
where you're going to
right.
talk about some of the central themes of the book. And I think that would be nice to have here.
Okay. Then if you just bear with me while for a moment while I upload the presentation. And so the book is called, we called it Restoring Order in Health and Chinese Medicine. And the subtitle is Studies of the Development and Use of Qi and the Channels or Meridian System. And I've just explained a little bit about how and why we came up with this book project. But there's an important theme that maybe many acupuncturists, people in the field, are not really familiar with. These ideas came out of a period of struggle in China. The concept of qi is quite old, but the concept of the meridians comes from the time of the Neijing. And let's talk briefly about how and why these concepts developed and became important for the practice of medicine, for example, in the Neijing. It comes out of a period called the Warring States period in China, where there was a lot of disorder in the country. And because of this great disorder in the country, a lot of conflict over an extended period of time, various groups started trying to, okay, look, we need to come up with a better way of running the country. We need to come up with better people to be in charge. You get the efforts of Confucius trying to develop the superior person who's capable of being a better person that can lead and run and do things. You get the various Taoist movements. Lao Tzu, Zhuangzi, and so on, also describing what do you need to do to become a better person? What do you need to focus on? If you're a better person, you're a more ethical person. If you're a more ethical person, you can influence people around you more effectively. If you affect and you therefore you can spread the good world in society and create a more positive influence in the world. And during this period, actually, ethics comes to be a very important concept. uh, there's a text called the Wuxing that was found in the Mawangdui dig, the archaeological dig, which is really focusing a lot about this ethical development and the process of doing that. And it's the same Wuxing of the five phases, but it doesn't refer to the five phases. Okay. Um, in this description about the ethics, Qi comes to play an important role. Qi is associated with ethics because if you can, the idea was the person who is developing themselves to become a better person, they have, it improves the condition of their qi. When their qi is in a better condition, it has this resonance effect on the people around them naturally. So they came up with this language of how you spread the word, so to speak. And also in this period, while this was going on with these various sort of, I don't know, self-development, political movements, you also see this period of self-cultivation beginning. Um, the in especially, for example, it becomes more focused in the more Taoist influence type of thinking. And there are several chapters in a book called the Guanzi from the third century, third, fourth century, earliest parts of it, at least from the third, fourth century BC. Um, there's three chapters called The Art of the Mind, which are interesting in that in it just about how you cultivate yourself, importance of cultivating the mind. But there's a very important chapter in there called the Neye, which basically is like a textbook on self-cultivation. And it's been argued that the Neye possibly lays the groundwork for other or most other forms of Taoist thinking, or at least was influential in these other strands of Taoist thinking. But you get this self cultivation process developing where you do these meditation techniques, you do this process of trying to regulate your emotions, cultivate your mind using breathing techniques, diet, exercise, all sort of this mind body development. And it was out of that the concept of chi really starts to become very important. really focal. And that language, especially in the Neyer, the language of self-development, focusing on cultivating and developing your chi, that language, it also gives rise to physiological descriptions of the body. There was not much well articulated descriptions of the body in health and disease prior to this period, but emerging out of these self-cultivation traditions, we start to see a focus on qi and the idea of qi as in physiological relationship to the body. And so the Neijing starts adopting this model. And the Neijing takes as a basic principle that we are doing needling to regulate the qi of the patient. The patient is ill because qi in their body has become disordered, just as society had become disordered during the Warring States period. And if you get the right person in charge, he restores order to society by helping regulate the qi of society, something like this. They were borrowing these kind of metaphorical ideas. Um, and they introduced the idea of, as practitioners, our goal is to restore the balance in the patient's body by regulating the chi of the patient. And we use needles to do this. They describe 9 kinds of needles, as you can see in the picture. And in order to do this effectively, they also introduced the 12 meridians, the 12 Jingmai. Chapter 10 of the Ling Shu describes the pathways and the symptoms of the 12 meridians, as well as the pathways and symptoms of the 15 low vessels. And it describes how the target of treatment is regulating the condition of excess and deficiency of the 12 meridians. And if you improve the state of the meridian, it is able to do its function better. And one of the primary functions of the meridian is to help regulate the systems inside the body. So if with a needle you can successfully regulate the 12 meridians by tonifying those that are deficient, by draining those that are excess, and restore a balanced system of 12 meridians where there's little or no excess and deficiency, it helps naturally improve the functioning of the internal systems. So this model emerged in the Neijing, and in order to do this even more effectively, they introduced, as I said before, they had 2 levels of description, one for the beginner. Okay, if you're just starting out, you're just learning this stuff. Here are some simple ideas about needling in order to create this movement towards less deficient meridian, this movement towards less excess meridian, this movement towards a more balanced state of the 12 meridians. And then it also described this more complicated, more difficult side of needling to do with the art of what the superior practitioner would be doing, where they are trying to interact more directly on the chi. For example, I mentioned already about the concept of De Qi is in the Nanjing 78 and Nanjing 80. De Qi is something that the practitioner feels, not the patient. It's actually worse than that because Nanjing 78 is a chapter that's describing, okay, you figured out what points you want to needle. Now you need to prepare the point before you needle it. So with your hands, you palpate the point, and then when the chi arrives, the chi, then you insert the needle to accomplish the goal of tonification or the goal of draining. So this is the language of the expert practitioner is that this language of Duchi is it's already to do with making contact with the patient at the acupuncture point. And if you're familiar with the language of the terminology they have in the Neijing and Nanjing, especially in the Neijing, about the meridians and the acupuncture points, points are called qi holes, qi shui, qi points. And the Ling Shu chapter 1 has this passage that describes the nature of the points. The points are places where qi moves, comma, they are not to do with local anatomical structures. So being able to find and work with the chi of the patient by contacting the point allows you to more effectively needle. This is the language of the superior practitioner, and it's not something you can just do. You got to have special experience or training, right? And um, this language of needling borrowed from the early self-cultivation literatures. If you want to do this stuff, what the superior practitioner can do, you have to be the same state as the superior person that's described in this self-cultivation literatures. Um, and in fact, Charles Chase, found a passage in Ling Shu chapter 9, that describes the state of the practitioner in order to more effectively needle. And he shows in an essay that he wrote in 2007, I think it was 2005, 2007, he shows that it borrows virtually explicitly from this passage in the Neye about the state of the practitioner doing these self-cultivation practices. It's almost identical language. Actually, in a funny aside, there's a passage. Vivian Lowe, who's a scholar in London, um, she found a passage in the Ling Shu about how qi arrives at the tip of the needle, and she says, "Oh my God! When you look at this passage in the He Yin Yang is a text that was found in the Ma Wang Dui archaeological digs, and it's a text about sexual practices." And it describes how when the male person is doing their thing, and at the point of orgasm, the chi arrives at the tip of the penis, and it borrows exactly the same language when he describes the arrival of chi at the tip of the needle. I'm sorry, guys. Don't think about it when you're needling, okay? But you can see in these two passages that the language of needling borrowed from the self-cultivation literatures. Okay. And it's to do with the practitioner needs to also have this kind of altered state in themselves. I mean, not like mind altering like LSD, but the body mind needs to be relaxed. You need to have this internal state. Um, you need to have the certain kind of focus, the ability to do certain things. It's not to do with this with the needle. That comes later. Okay. So anyway, and as I said, this is something Dochi is something the practitioner feels. So this takes specialized training or just a lot of practice and experience and focusing on what you're doing so that you can figure these things out and learn to understand. Oh yeah, when I feel this, that's the right time. This is the right thing. Your imagination doesn't substitute. You have to learn this stuff. Anyway, as these concepts, as these methods were developed in the Neijing and then articulated more clearly in the Nanjing, you find that the meridians and the concept of qi in the meridians, they just gradually evolved. Different people over time, writing in different centuries in China and then later in Japan and Korea, and writing in different textbooks, they had different understandings of these things, and you see concepts of chi and the meridians evolving and taking on different meanings, different uses. For example, one of the things that you see is the concept of chi becomes more focused on a physiological description, and this is very helpful for herbal medicine practitioners to focus on this in this way, because with this more detailed description of chi in relation to physiological functioning, it allows for more refinement of how to use the herbs to affect that. Different herbs affect different kinds of functioning. Um, but also, the meridians came to understand. People came to understand the meridians in different ways. For example, after the Han Dynasty, Huang Fumi, who is the author of the Zhenju Jiaijing, or the ABC of acupuncture textbook, written about 282 AD, BCE. He complains at the beginning of the book, "Oh, these damn acupuncture points. The Neijing doesn't really clearly describe where they are. They're really frustratingly difficult. So I'm going to state really clearly where they are." So he focuses on anatomical descriptors to help you find where the points are. And during a period that would maybe work for a while, but then there's a period of several centuries where acupuncture became known as a deadly therapy. We think people were using non-sterile needles and causing infections, or they were inserting deeply and causing damage. People were not understanding about safety issues very well. But then it was the Song Dynasty emperor commissioned Wang Wei to write the bronze statue textbook. His theory was, this Song emperor was, theory was, well, maybe acupuncture, if we re-describe very clearly where the points are, so everybody knows where they are, we even build a bronze statue as a testing tool for examining people's skills with point location. If we do that, maybe acupuncture can be reinvigorated. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. Acupuncture came back to life after the Bronze Statue textbook was written. Um, but uh, but in this process, the acupuncture points got more and more described in relation to anatomical structures to help you find them. And then as you move into the modern period, where the modern anatomical model of the body starts influencing thinking in China, first in Japan, then in China, and across into Korea, where, everybody is looking at the same body and pointing at something and labeling it the same way. That's a nerve, it's this nerve, that's a blood vessel, it's this blood vessel. Then the acupuncture points naturally, gradually started becoming anatomical things. And in the modern period, there's a big emphasis on the anatomical locations and nature of the acupuncture points. Everybody wants to describe that, but originally they weren't. They were nothing to do with the local anatomy. They were described in relation to the movement of qi. So you can see throughout a long period of time, these ideas gradually took on different meanings, got used in different ways. One of the things that happened over time is those who were reading the Neijing, those who were reading the Nanjing closely, might have focused on the meridian system, the 12 meridians, as a main target for diagnosis and treatment. Our goal is to regulate the qi of the patient. So naturally, those practitioners, whether 500 years ago or in the 20th century, focusing on their early descriptions, would say then our primary diagnosis and target of treatment is the meridian system. This is what you see happened with meridian therapy, Kerokuchirio, in the just pre-war period in Japan. Um, but there are also people that have been practicing acupuncture alongside herbal medicine or with herbal medicine, and where you find that the theories that have guided herbal medicine practice, but are less emphasizing on acupuncture and the meridian system. They're more focusing on the body fluids and the internal organ systems where the herbs act directly. Um, Maybe the meridian system, it plays a secondary role for some herbalists, and then there are also some practitioners who practice the two together extensively, where you get this congruent description of herbs and uh, acupuncture, and a physiology description of the body that places a higher art where the meridian system is given a little bit more emphasis than someone who's only an herbalist and doesn't use acupuncture, where the meridian system is given less emphasis naturally, because acupuncturists stick needles in the meridians. So if you're doing more acupuncture, you need to pay attention to that more. So you see that the role of the meridian system throughout history in the whole area in Asia, moving into the West in the 20th century in particular, the meridian system plays more or less role and is more or less focus for the target of treatment. Okay. And qi is one of the things that's happened with the concept of qi is very curious because, well, what you see when you look at the early descriptions, the language of qi and how it came to be used in the early medical literature, basically, by the time of the Neijing, an important theory was a kind of cosmological idea. Everything's made of qi. There's nothing special about it. Everything's qi. You've got this swirling mass of unborn, undifferentiated stuff. The light part goes up to become heaven. That's the light chi rises up to become heaven. The heavy chi settles down to become earth, and so on. And then out of the interaction of heaven and earth, the humans are created. So everything is born of this single undifferentiated chi. It's everything. But when you get into the medical literature, you find you have to differentiate it. You can't just talk about chi and chi and chi. You've got to label it as the chi over there, the spleen chi, or the chi over there, the meridian chi, or the chi that protects the wei chi. You get these different kind of chi described, right? So you get this. You see the term chi. It can be used only as a single standalone term, or it can refer to, or you can differentiate it into lots of different things. And maybe all those different subsets are really the same. They're just strands of the same web, if you will. Right. And what happened is in the modern period, um, many people, especially in the West, who don't really understand about the history of Asian thinking. They don't understand about the nature of thinking in Asia. They don't understand about the history of Qi and the meridians and how these concepts would rise and fall in importance in different themes and different styles of practice over periods of time. There's a tendency for some people to want to put the concept of chi on a pedestal and make it something super special, right? And I would argue well, in a way, it's not really special because it's everything. How can it be special? It's more that in order to work more directly with the chi, you need to do these you need to either be a very experienced practitioner who's figured out how to do that, or you need specialized training that has gradually helped you understand how to do that in a more accelerated way than figuring it out on your own. And that is something special. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I've had a number of teachers who have between 45 and 60 years of clinical experience. And when some of those guys were talking, you stop everything and you just listen and you pay close attention because what they say is very meaningful. It's usually very deep, and it's not theoretical, it's very practical. Um, and but those of us who have had less exposure to this, we tend to make something special out of it. We tend to do something, we make the theory a little bit odd and on not realistic. For example, I mentioned at the beginning of this interview that in Asia, the tendency of how to describe things was more focusing on uh, describing things in a way that allows you to act and make your action more effective, as opposed to describing things in a more abstract way without action. So one of the things, the first chapter we wrote in our book was about the history, nature, development of qi, and then starting to explore how people were using this term. And one of the things we noticed as we were looking at these various themes, as the concept of qi was emerging, being discussed more, starts coming into more dialogue, especially in the medical literature, is it looks as though the concept of chi comes a lot out of how we experience the world. It's um, our ability to understand the world through our experiences of the world. Chi is related in part to all of that. That's quite complicated. And I would recommend you read a bit at the end of the chapter on this. I think we did a pretty good job with that. And um, if you're able, in order to figure out how to act more effectively, um, maybe being able to bring chi directly, being interact and work with the chi more directly, allows us to perform our actions more effectively. And this is something that Miguel wrote about in the little essay that's the takeaway extra that we've more recently put together, because it's not limited to being able to more effectively use a needle to create change in the patient's body. working through the system of chi. It's also to do with our daily activities. It's also to do with learning to play the piano versus learning to play something that sounds like the piece that you want it to sound like versus being able to do a concert performance, or learning to dance, or learning to work with wood, or learning to do anything in daily life. The kind of things that allow us to do our needling more effectively like that, they're the same things that inform our ability to perform any of our actions more effectively. Be more relaxed, be more quietly focused. You can't make it happen. You have to let it happen. When you've rehearsed it and practiced it repeatedly, then you're naturally able to engage the chi more effectively. I don't want to say much more on this because Miguel's got a really nice way of describing this. Oh, my PowerPoint stopped. So, just I want to finish on one. There's a key phrase that we identified from Zhuangzi, that we thought was, we brought it up repeatedly throughout the book, and also I think Chip Chase and Dan Bensky also focused on this piece because it seems to be quite a juicy piece. He's talking about the ability to do certain things and so on. And he says this passage, make your will one. Don't listen with your ears, listen with your mind. No, don't listen with your mind, but listen with your chi, your vital energy. Right? So let's unpack this. Make your will one. Don't listen with your ears. Well, this is really listening with the ears is what you do. Okay, I'm listening. I don't do anything special. My ears are open, they're unplugged. I can hear what you're saying. And then when I'm acting, what it means, this is the work of the beginner. If I'm acting, I'm the work of the beginner. I'm kind of trying to figure out, okay, what do I do? How do I do this? Right? It's more the beginner's actions. Listening with your mind as a higher state of functioning is, I'm no longer listening with only my ears. My sensory perception of the world has changed. I'm listening with the mind, and I'm more engaged in all the actions. I'm able to do it routinely. This is more the work of the experienced person who doesn't have to think about what they're doing. They just do it, and their hands know what they're, it's like a body mind action. You just know what you're doing. You can do it. Like if you listen to somebody playing the piano and they have to stop and think, where does my pinky go now? It doesn't sound very good, does it? This person is able to play the piano and it's already sounding pretty good, right? There's no hesitation. It's just you're acting smoothly. And then don't listen with your mind, but listen with your vital energy, your chi. This is the work of the super expert, the person, the very rare person who is able to perceive the world around them, perceive the things they're acting on through their chi. And by perceiving through their chi, since everything is chi, you're interacting directly with it. There's no separation anymore. You're one with it, if you will. And as I said, I've been fortunate to study with practitioners with decades of experience who can do things that I can only dream of, that I can hope one day I can do it. I've been at concerts listening to this pianist make a piano sound like something. I just can't imagine how you can make such beautiful sounds with your hands like that. That's not the work of everybody. This is the work of the true expert, right? The one who's really gone beyond, right? Um, and then this listening with your ears stops with the ears, the mind stops with recognition, but vital energy is empty and waits on all things. This is one of the key themes of the book, is finding that quiet stillness, that emptiness, to allow you to be able to contact and work more directly with your chi, on the chi. That's the highest level of action, being able to do that in a chi-based model. And I think for there, I'm going to stop.
Thank you so much. I mean, you remind me of something that Hal Elrond said. He was the author of the Miracle Morning Routine, and he said, "Everything is difficult before it's easy." And when you're a beginner, it's like you have to think about everything. Like you're saying, you have to think where your pinky is. It's like doing a kata in martial arts. You have to
Right.
practice it. And
Yep.
then at a certain point, it starts to become fluent and it becomes internalized. And then you're no
Yep.
longer thinking about it. And it's coming from inside you rather than from up here. So yeah, I think you can only get to that point with a lot of practice. So thank you so much for that presentation.